Welcome to another episode of Bent Not Broken. Heartbreak and trauma may feel like the end of your story, but here it's the beginning of a bold new chapter. I'm your host, Coach Deborah Griffiths, and this is the space where women rise, rebuild, and rediscover their purpose. Remember this truth: you are bent, not broken. I am so excited today to welcome my next guest. Not only is he a friend, but he's a father. He's a mentor. He is the founder of Make Sense Academy. He's a podcaster of the highly rated Make Sense podcast. He's an author, entrepreneur, and health transformation coach. Welcome, Dr. JC Doornick. Hi, JC. Thank you so much for being here today.
Man, I wish I could bring you around with me everywhere I go and just have you introduce me to people.
I would love to. You're all around great guy. Should add that as the caveat to the end. But I really do appreciate you being here. As you know, we're going to talk about a tough subject for a lot of people, and it's one thing we both share. Of one of the many things we have in common, we both have been through a divorce. Right. And I'd like for you to tell the listeners today a little bit about your divorce story and maybe what was the turning point for you?
Turning point as far as like what made me want a divorce or type?
Or yeah, just... what was it that you realized this was the end of the marriage and you needed to make a change?
I think what's interesting, first of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Thank you.
At the precipice of what will be one day the most popular podcast that's ever been on the airwaves. So
thank you. I appreciate
honored. Don't forget me when you're a big shot.
Okay.
So what's interesting about divorce is before I just jump in and talk about that, I think it's important to talk about why you got married, because technically that there must have been a mistake there, right? So I come from a divorced set of parents. And so what I knew was that my dad was never home, and there was always, like background talk. I was a little too young to understand it, but background talk that he was not alone, but somewhere else, if you know what I mean. Yes. And, my mother was always upset, and, my mother kind of raised us by herself. But at that age, it's very easy to forgive your father and just assume, oh, he's just working and he loves us anyway and stuff. But when they get divorced, that's when, the first wound hits and you start to imprint some ideas about marriage. I went through a long, length of time where I kind of like resented my dad because I realized that he was the one that kind of failed, right? My mom didn't want a divorce. So I kind of went through this phase where I felt bad for my mom, and I didn't know. Listen, I was just a kid. I think I was 11 when my parents got divorced. And it was a very, very traumatic time. I was able to just pretend it didn't happen, but because I was too young to really absorb it. But I began the process of tagging and labeling my father as who I didn't want to be. So that being said, I started to get this idea that when I get married, I'm never going to get divorced. So what's interesting about that, I mean, that's kind of a naive thing to be able to say. I mean, it's hopeful, but what's interesting about that, and I as you know, I'm very into human behavior, is I started to design the person that I wanted to marry less in the idea of somebody that I truly loved and more in the idea of who would be a good wife. So that's where that was the first thing I did wrong. And my idea was to find somebody that was completely not like anybody in my family, because I just associated that would be a disaster, right? The girl that I decided to marry was a friend of mine. And, we were friends from school. And, there was a little bit of serendipitous kind of synchronistic things. Like we ended up going to the same college. We ended up going to Atlanta together and things like that. So I kind of bought into the idea that, oh my God, I'm going to marry my friend, and this is so great. And she came from a family that didn't have any divorce in it and stuff. So that's probably why I married her. I mean, like on paper, it was a good idea.
So it seemed easy. It was comfortable.
Well, it was easy. I would say more safe than anything,
Okay.
you know?
Okay. Yeah.
So what I didn't know, because I also had this idea in my head that you didn't need to be like in love to get married, because what I knew about love is that doesn't last forever.
And it causes a lot of hurt and pain.
Yeah, there's that too. So I didn't have anything that I didn't put a lot of weight on the importance of having like chemistry and love and things like that. I just said, hey, this is a great woman, comes from a good family, and she's an athlete, and we'll have healthy kids and all of that stuff. So now back to your other question, where I started to realize that we were not like each other. I was very, very much into travel and adventure and a little bit of living in a little bit of an extreme lifestyle, whether it was skiing or going to different countries. I was doing humanitarian work in Haiti and stuff like that. So here I am chasing this big life. And, I built a chiropractic practice and everything. And I guess the only thing I can tell you is I started coming home and feeling her resenting me for never being home, which I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, because I would always say, hey, you want to come with me? But that's not what she wanted. She wanted to make a home. She wanted a white picket fence and all of that stuff. So that was the first sign that, like, uh-oh. But in my brain, I'm never getting divorced. So, we're just going to deal with it. So we never had, and there were some other differences. I was not somebody, I didn't party. I mean, I did in college and stuff, but later on in life, I was, I didn't like drink and things like that. And she did a little bit of that. So, but there was just so many things that just said were different. And so I went through all of these years of just saying, it doesn't matter, it is what it is. This is who you're married to. You're never getting divorced. That's the tough part about a marriage is, and I'm somebody that had a high regard for women,
Mhm.
in the sense that I saw my mom not be really treated well. So I made a point to like honor this woman and try to do the best that I could, especially in the eyes of my kids, because I had trauma from what I had seen, right? So that's it. We just, I guess society would say we were kind of growing apart, and, there wasn't much intimacy and things like that. And it just became kind of like work. You know what I mean? And I think we probably both resented each other in a way. I think her stance, from what I understood, because we went to therapy and stuff, she began thinking like, I don't want this. What happened to you? This is not what, I beg your pardon. I never promised you a rose garden. That's what I was thinking. Like, but she was saying, yes, you did. I knew that I was coming to, well, first of all, there was no intimacy. That was one thing. And I knew that's probably not a good idea. I started to feel bad that I was starving her from getting what she wanted. So there was some guilt involved and stuff like that. And for the first time, I never like went around and cheated and stuff, but I started to notice people,
Mm.
for the first time, and I didn't feel good about that. So I guess what the turning point for me was a little bit of feeling bad that I was starving her from having something meaningful. I didn't want my boys to grow up knowing that their dad and mom were not really in love and he just put up with it and stuff. I wanted to try to teach them some values. I don't know. That's a very confusing thing with the kids. Um,
It is. It is.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think the turning point for me was that I realized that I wasn't getting any younger, and neither was she. And I didn't ask for a divorce so that I could be with somebody else. I almost did so that she could. And that's a very
Mm.
strange thing. I remember I had a mentor that laid it to me very straight one time, as he used to. He said, I said, how do you know if it's time to get a divorce? And he's a little bit of a crazy guy. And the way he put it was, well, you know what happens after you divorce? I go, what? He goes, she's going to get in the greatest shape of her life and start being with other men. Are you okay with that? And I remember saying, I think I am. He goes, you're ready for a divorce.
Yeah.
So, we were never at odds, although she resented me, I think, because I was living this extraordinary life and leaving her home with the kids sometimes and stuff. Even when I worked, I would work from early morning to night in the practice. It just got to this place where we weren't happy.
So what you thought was safe and easy
Mm.
and that you were compatible ended up proving that it wasn't because it was missing that key ingredient
Well, she
of
wasn't, as my
love.
mom said, my mom liked her very much, but she goes, she's not one of us.
Yeah.
Meaning we're a little bit eccentric, we're a little bit crazy, we're not like that. This
Right.
family that what you thought was safe is too safe for you.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know we've heard the term, opposites attract. And sometimes we think that attraction will manifest itself and last, but sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
And that's the key. So how many children did the marriage produce and how did they take the divorce?
It's so interesting to think about a marriage like a factory that's produced.
Yes.
Mm. This marriage produced two kids. So we two the greatest boys, and they are flourishing. One thing that I made a point to do was I never had the opportunity to talk to my dad about what happened.
Okay.
So I tried, when they're young, they're young. I mean, they were pretty young. They were like 5 and 7
Okay.
thing when we got divorced, and which I was dreading, I mean, like, oh my God, that was the worst part about it, is that I was failing them, and I had this trauma of resenting my dad and thinking he had failed us. So I had built up this whole thing in my head about, like, that was the end of my life, telling my boys that, sorry, but I'm a sucker. I'm a shitty dad. I probably did when I was 11. When my parents told me, they just kind of said, okay. Like, they didn't know what it was. They were so used to me traveling and stuff. They didn't get the idea that I was going to live somebody where else. And, we did everything in our power, her and I, because we really did put the kids first, mm, to make sure that the kids knew that their mother was the highest priority. It's not that I was less, but I always made sure that they understand that she is the highest. And but we still love you. This is not your fault. And we would just really make sure that we were co-parenting. And look, everybody says, "Oh my God, this is like a perfect situation." No, it was very, very difficult. There was a lot of resentment, and then there's money problems and all of that stuff associated with it. I don't recommend it to anybody unless you're 100% sure, because this is about the cleanest divorce you'll ever see, and it was still very, very difficult. But what I made sure of is that they had an open channel to ask any questions about it, that there were no lies and things like that, and deceit, and once again, I just made sure that they saw me honoring. But I waited a while before I had like a girlfriend and things like that. And consequently, she ended up falling in love with a guy that she knew from when she was younger. And, she's still with him and we're all friends. And it worked out for her in a sense, but it was probably very difficult at the time as well.
Oh, I'm sure. And you're right. This is probably one of the cleanest divorce stories I've ever heard. And that
Right.
certainly wasn't my experience. But, kudos to you.
Sure,
You
sure it
said,
wasn't.
yeah, kudos to you because you said something that really resonated with me. And I think it is so important for both either the mother and the father is not to badmouth the other parent to the child.
Yeah.
It's hard enough when you break up the family unit as it is.
That's forever damaging.
It's it is, and even like you said, it's even difficult under the cleanest of situations. But I think that's a point, and is that easy to do? No, like you said, money issues come up. Maybe a parent misses their visitation, something comes up in their schedule, it throws off your parenting schedule. So it's easy to have those underlying frustrations, but you always have to try to take the high road, I believe, when raising your kids. Again,
I
easier
will
said
say,
than done.
I'll say one thing though. I know that on your show, you're probably going to have very different examples of this,
Mhm.
domestic violence and things like that. So I will say that this is, and this comes at the expense of all these years of personal growth and self-development I had done. And I had great mentors and things like that. So I did not do this alone. Like I had a solid foundation of knowing what was right and what was wrong. And I also thank my parents for screwing up so badly to show me what not to do. But what I was going to say is the concept of domestic violence, like I never understood how like a man could strike a woman
Mhm.
or do something so terrible like these stories that you hear. But I do understand how that could happen if there's no open communication. And because even in my situation, there were times where things would happen where my knee jerk reflex was, what the, we would be at odds on something. So had we not had the ability to both put the kids first and not only not talk bad about each other, but talk good about each other. So I just want everybody to understand that when you see a marriage not work and people become at odds, they're unconscious. Like they don't know how bad they're screwing up the kids. And they also just don't know, they don't have communication skills. They're just reacting rather than responding. So as you know, because we've worked together, that's
Yeah.
my whole thing is teaching people how to think for a second before they respond. So if I had let my knee-jerk reflex lead the way, I could see how you could go down a path of hating each other. So I don't acknowledge or justify or advocate for domestic violence, of course, but I kind of understand that it is a result of people not doing too much work on themselves.
I think that's a valid point. Valid
Yeah.
point. What was the hardest part of navigating life after the divorce for you?
Guilt, like when you feel that you were the one that created this problem, you go into this mode where you don't do anything for yourself, or at least that's the way I reacted. And I devoted my whole life to not only the kids and making sure that they were loved and happy, but also to my ex-wife. I gave her way more money than I probably needed to, which was stupid because, I was making great money, but then that changed and then I was broke, so it was a very unhealthy time for me because I felt so guilty that I tried to fix that by like spending every second of my day trying to make her and them happy. And I forgot about myself. So it was a very, very stressful time, a lot of anxiety. but also a lot of like just unhealthy, lonely living. And when I would go out and try to date and things like that, I just failed miserably at that, just because I didn't let anybody into my life because I didn't want to harm this thing that I was trying to mend, So yeah, many years of guilt and bad sleep and not liking myself very much.
So, what steps did you take to begin working on yourself and helping yourself through this process? It's a very painful process.
Yeah,
I
very
think
painful.
your feelings are very valid. I think a lot of people, myself included, you feel that guilt and you internalize, and many times we resort to developing unhealthy habits like
Right.
overeating or drinking or
So
whatever.
this is kind of there's two things at play there. I as you know, for almost 20 years, I've been a health transformation coach, and that came as a result of me starting with my physical health. If you don't like yourself and you don't like your situation and you're depressed and you have anxiety, you're typically feeling out of control. So the first thing that I did was take control of something that wasn't my control, and that was my health. I lost 80 pounds. I
Wow.
put hydration and nutrition and exercise and meditation, and I started to read. And I just, like I said, I took control of the things that I could control, and I began learning how to release from the things that I couldn't, like my circumstances, when it came to other people. So that's the number one thing that I would say to everybody, is that no matter what your situation is, you are always going to be at an advantage if you begin with your health, your physical health. Because my saying is on a healthy body rests a healthy mind. So that started to make me, and as you know, I all this work that I do in this system called the interface response system, it's all about me learning how to handle adversity and change the way I look at things. So that's what I needed to do, is I needed to change the way I was looking at this, because the way I was looking at it was making me feel terrible. So I started with my physical health. That woke me up. I started seeing things differently. And, I would say the number one breakthrough that I made was that I was telling myself this story that wasn't true.
Mm.
It wasn't true. I was making up this whole story, probably because I didn't like myself very much. I was like putting myself down. So I started to realize that I could write my own story. I had choices and things like that. And what was interesting is that all of the things that I thought that these people cared about, to find that they didn't even think about them. I was the only one, thinking about all these terrible thoughts that I had done wrong and all of that stuff. That's what I've devoted my life to now, is teaching people how to do that, with this system. But that's how I did it. I started with my physical. You can't skip physical. If you're having an emotional struggle in life and you're overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, all of that stuff, you cannot move forward until you take control of your health. I mean, I've seen many, many people try to do it. That's got to be paramount, because it's on a healthy body that a healthy mind rests. You can't skip it. You might get a little bit of results and you might convince yourself into something, but if you don't like who you see in the mirror and you don't feel good about yourself, it's tough. So that's the first step. And then along the way, things clear up. Things clear up and the weather starts to pass.
Yes, that fog lifts, right?
That's right.
Right, and it entails our mind, our body, and our spirit. It's all intertwined, and
Yeah.
when one thing is out of balance, everything becomes out of balance. So,
Totally.
I love that get your what focus on what you can control,
Mm,
and you can control what you put in your mouth.
that's
So,
right. And what and
start
what
to
comes out and what comes out. If you
very
if you
true, very
think
true,
think first.
very true. Did you have a person or maybe who was your biggest source of support that you relied on through all of this?
Wow.
Or maybe it's not a
I,
who, it's
I
a
would
what?
I would say no. I mean, I did get spiritual, but I don't know, there was a lot of shame associated with it, so I kind of kept it to myself. Like the only
Mhm.
people that are really out there for you are the people that are divorced and they're a little bit of a mess, right? The people my good friends that were in marriages, their wives didn't want them to talk to me anymore. So it's like you become this person. Like I lost a lot of friends.
Yeah,
So
that happens.
that probably was something that caused me to start dating. Like I wasn't looking for a wife or a girlfriend, but I remember during the dating years before I met the love of my life, I remember what I was really trying to find was somebody that cared about me. So I felt like I wasn't alone. So that never worked, but that's what I was looking for. Whenever I dated somebody, my friends would be like, "What are you doing with that person?" And I'd be like, "She's crazy about me." And that's all I was looking for was somebody that made me feel like I was not going through life alone. Companionship, I
Okay.
should say. But yeah, I never had a mentor through that
Okay.
time. Most of my mentors were divorced, so they helped me figure that part out of it. But yeah, I didn't have, it was an alone time, which is not fun. That's not fun to, the company that I worked with was projecting this shiny, happy people, family, nobody gets divorced, Christian, and all of that stuff. And I was like, oof, God, that's not even close to me. And
Yeah.
they, I had a very busy speaking schedule, and I was like one of the primary people on this big stages in front of thousands of people with my company. And when we got divorced, they took me off the lineup because they were worried about that. And what's interesting about that is I said to them, I go, you guys are projecting like a completely unrealistic life. I go, at least 50, 60% of that audience is divorced. I promise you. So when they let me finally come back on stage and speak the truth, the crowd all was like, thank God, finally somebody's telling the truth. So it's unfortunate, but I would say most marriages do end in divorce.
They do, and then sometimes I think when you fail at a marriage, you feel like you walk around life wearing that scarlet letter,
That's right.
and it may be temporary, but there is life after divorce. And I'd like to shift to this next question because you mentioned love and dating.
Yeah.
So, how has your perspective on love, dating, and relationships shifted since your divorce?
Well, I mean, you're talking to me now after I've been 7 years with everybody calls me the dragon. So my wife, they know as the chicken. And when you find somebody that is truly the one for you, they could do no wrong. That's what's interesting. Like anything, like bad breath, body odor, or saying something wrong, or making mistakes. Like when you really, really love somebody and they love you back, nothing can stop it. I would say that for anybody out there that's saying, well, how do you find that? You can't find it. You can attract it and
Mhm.
welcome it, but you can't find it. So, the song is, what is it? How does the song go? Looking for love in all the wrong
Wrong
places.
places, yeah.
There's no
Country
song
western
that
songs.
says, there's no song that says looking for love in all the right places. I don't think you can look for love. I think you can become open to it, but every story you hear, very much like mine, is you, it's when you give up and you just say, I'm going to be just happy on my own, and I'm going to work on the things that matter most, my health, my children, my work, thinking that you're giving up on dating, but what you don't know is you just made yourself attractive.
You made yourself the priority
Well,
for
you make yourself,
healing and
But also that's what creates a magnetic attraction for the one.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say is anybody out there on the waves right now, there is somebody, you might be with them, but there is somebody for you. I believe, I really do. But the question is are you going to allow them to find you? And the way that you do is to work on yourself and release from trying to find, you don't know who is right for you, obviously. So when this person shows up, like when Chicken showed up in my life, she didn't look like anything she's from South Africa. I mean, like I never, I didn't even know where South Africa was. I knew it was in Africa, but it's not. So I know that the only reason her and I met is because I stopped trying to find somebody and I just prioritized the things that mattered most. And then boom, it just comes
Wow.
out of nowhere.
I
Yeah.
love that. And I think it's so true. I think what you just said is so true.
Mm.
So, what is one piece of advice you'd give to someone listening right now who's right in the middle of a divorce?
The first thing, I would say either way you look at it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It sucks. I hope it doesn't suck a lot for you. But even in a situation like mine, like you heard, it's still going to suck. So you have to not get attached to like this idea that it's going to be over. Cause I mean, like we're divorced many, many, many years and there's still residuals of it. So don't get so caught up in like getting through it because you never really get through a divorce. That's one thing that I would say. But the catastrophe that you're and the pending doom of it and all of that stuff, like anything else, like the clouds in the sky, the weather, it's going to pass. This too shall pass. And that's a hard one when you're in it and you're in its grip. You don't think it's ever going to end. And there's just one thing after another. And whether it's money and family and friends and, you know,
Visitation issues.
kids have problems and all that stuff. Yeah, we didn't really have any problems with the visitation issues because we did what was right for the kids, but it never ends. It never ends. If you know that for the most part, it is true that life sucks and then you die, you might as well learn how to enjoy the suck and look at it kind of as a training ground. And I mean, like, if you can't learn how to have a good day on a bad day, then you're going to have a bad life.
Mhm.
So I
Very
would,
true.
this is what I'm so passionate about in the Make Sense Academy is helping people learn how to change the way they look at things. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So if you don't like the way things look in your life, then you need to not try to get rid of those things. You just have to change the way you look at them. So that's everything right there. I remember just saying, "Oh God, if we could just get the paperwork done, and if I just move into this place," and it's like that. Here I am, years and years later. It never ends. So learn how to have a good day on a bad day by changing the way you look at things.
I love that. I love that. JC, thank you so much for being a guest. I've enjoyed this conversation. If someone wants to know more about you or the Make Sense Academy or, listen to your Make Sense podcast, what's the best way they can get a hold of you? And I'll be sure to put everything in the show notes.
Just go get a big spotlight and shine a dragon up in the sky, and I will come to you. That's what.
Okay. All right.
Um,
We don't need
the-
Batman. We just need the dragon.
you can. I'm sure you'll have some links, but you can follow
Okay.
me on Instagram at Dr. JC Doornick, and you can look up the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, and you can't miss it because it's just a yellow box with these black glasses with no rims in them or no lenses in them, and you can find out everything about that. Make Sense Academy is my passion project. It's something that I wanted to make an environment where people could get, coaching, mentoring, and a lot of really, really cool, deep self-work and personal growth, but not have to pay exorbitant amounts of money. So as you know, that's what makes Make Sense Academy so special, is that it's something that like anybody, even like a college student, could afford. And that's because it's in a group environment. So if anybody is interested in checking that out, we offer a 7-day free trial.
Excellent. And I do actually recommend it. I'm in the academy myself,
So
and
we're very
there's
lucky to have her.
thank you, thank you. No, it's very much worthwhile, and there is a lot to be said about changing the way we look at ourselves and life in general. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Bent, Not Broken. I hope that this episode reminded you that even through life's toughest moments, you are bent, not broken. If this message inspired you, please share, rate, review, and subscribe, as it helps us reach more women who are ready to rise and rebuild. And until next time, keep living bold and walking in your purpose.